Welcome to The Secret Place. I'm so glad that you've joined me. Today we have a short passage from Henri Nouwen's The Way of the Heart, one of my favorites, as you know, if you've been listening or viewing for a while. Today Nouwen is talking about the prayer of rest, the prayer of silence, and how the prayer of silence helps to bring us into rest. Here on page 70 of this book, he writes, "The prayer of silence is a prayer of rest. This rest, however, has little to do with the absence of conflict or pain. It is a rest in God in the midst of a very intense daily struggle. Abba Anthony even says to a fellow monk that it belongs to the great work of a man to expect temptations to his last breath. In spite of these temptations, the rest which flows from unceasing prayer needs to be sought at all costs, even when the flesh is itchy, the world alluring, and the demons noisy." Hey, does that sound familiar to you in your daily life? The world alluring, the demons noisy, the flesh is itchy. Oh boy, don't we all know it? And you know what? Those who say they don't know that and everything's calm and cool and copacetic, I think they're lying, because we all have those kinds of temptations. Nouwen is talking about, of course, the desert dwellers, the desert fathers and mothers from the 4th century, this 3rd and the 4th century after Christ. And he is talking about, it's in the context of their fleeing from the cities to find some place of quietude, to find a place where they're not constantly being drawn back in to the embroiling temptations that Nouwen was talking about, the particular temptations that they had back then. And I love it because he aligns this prayer of silence with a prayer of rest, or the rest that we can find in God through Christ. That's the only place we can find rest, my friends, is in Christ. Because if we look any place else, even if there's momentary satisfaction or reprieve from the chaos, it doesn't last. But the rest, if we rest in God, and the peace of Christ is there. And so how do we find this rest? How do we walk in this rest? You know what? I think this is a lifelong endeavor. This is something that we don't do once for all. We don't get once for all, but we practice. And we practice it in many ways. And also depending on where you are in your faith, and you might be fresh out of walking in drunkenness or habitual drugs and drug addiction, and you might have very strict, very fine, narrow boundaries around your life, what to do, when, to kind of get your life together. And if you're in that place right now, great, you go for it. Okay. That's what we have to do to start sometimes with the prayer of silence, to get into a rhythm of silence where it becomes our natural habitat. Just like after a while, if you in your sobriety, after several months or several years, I suppose, it becomes natural, like it's supernaturally natural, right? But it becomes something that is a great habit, and you're not thinking about anymore too much because you're just walking it out and living it out. Same thing happens with the prayer of silence, is that those first few months or years, it's a challenge to walk in the discipline of silent practices and contemplative practices, because sometimes, as we've mentioned before on The Secret Place, sometimes it feels like you're wasting your time. You could have spent that 15 minutes or that hour or that 2 hours that you're trying to just be quiet and silent before the Lord. You could have been very productive, and it goes on for days like that. I know, I've been there, done that, as my friend Doug says, got the t-shirt. But the more that we give ourselves to the practices of silence, of solitude, of stillness, the more attuned we become to what's going on inside of us, the more attuned and the more we key into that connection in that space where we meet with the Lord, in whatever that looks like for you, the more it becomes our natural habitat. And that's part of the good news that I wanted to share today with this little passage from Henri Nouwen. It's really part of the good news. It doesn't ever stop. You always continue. We will always continue to give ourselves over to that rhythm of silence, stillness, and solitude, especially as it gets some days or weeks or years in our life, it's more chaotic than others, or it's over-organized, or it's busier than others. But there does come a time where it's more like breathing. It's just the peace is there. The rest is there. There is no striving. It's just kind of hunkering down into that place that the psalmist calls the secret place of the Most High God. If you have comments, questions, or insights, please leave them. I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to interact with you. Take care now. Until next time, this is Stephanie. God bless you.